If you are using intention and responsibility with mushrooms, is extremely therapeutic. The therapeutic medical setting and the recreational setting aren't that divided. Like the boundary between them is not as solid as we might think.
We are here today with Stephanie Abrams from Beyond Consulting, and we're going to be talking about the world of psychedelics and plant medicine.
Today, things have been fast-tracked. People can access these psilocybin mushrooms pretty much anywhere. I studied neuropharmacology. I worked in the ICU with a pharmacy team, and my focus was brain injury. What I noticed was that years after the injury had healed, the physical injury, these patients, these people were still on the same types of drugs.
Why do you think that was?
Because we have no other options. And unfortunately, our system is so freaking broken that doctors have barely 20 minutes to give to their patients. If you experience a difficult moment in your life or a trauma, you get this maladaptive pattern that settles in, and now it's really hard to break that pattern. Psychedelics offer this ability to reopen the neuroplastic window. And how do you approach a problem? How do you find the solution? The answers are there. The information is there. It's not just a medicine. It's not just a pharmacological agent. It's a total life change.
All right. We are here today with Stephanie Abrams from Beyond Consulting, and we're going to be talking about the world of psychedelics and plant medicine.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Happy for you to be here as well. So, where do we begin? There's been a big surgence in the world of psychedelics, especially psilocybin. I see more and more folks, they're microdosing, they're doing all kinds of things with and trying out different strains of psilocybin because they have different effects. What is that all about? Where's it going?
Oh my goodness, that's such a big question.
I know.
Well, there are different people doing different things with mushrooms, right? So if you go way back to traditional, ancient, historical, and ceremonial practice, that's where I like to start, because these are plants that grow in the ground, and there are people that came long before us that have been using them and that have helped introduce them to our world and our society. So we owe a lot to them. And they have a lot of knowledge, and I think that we need to practice with psilocybin, with mushrooms and these plants with a lot of respect and with these people in mind, and I think today, things have been fast-tracked. People can access these psilocybin mushrooms pretty much anywhere, regardless of legality. You've got people that are using them ceremonially. You have people who are using them recreationally, right? Maybe amongst friends, maybe by themselves. And then you have people that are using them medicinally, therapeutically within a more medical model. And so a lot of people are funding a lot of research right now to see how psychedelics like psilocybin could help within the sphere of mental health, within the spheres of neurology, within the spheres of women's health. And I think we're going to see a ton of advancements. But the policy and the legalization is what needs to follow, right? It's like, will it be decriminalized? Is it just going to be accessible? Is it going to be accessible through a medical model? Is it going to be the natural form of psilocybin, the whole mushroom? Is it going to be an isolated compound, a synthetic? The world is really vast within this field right now.
I know that some states allow for psilocybin therapy.
Yeah. So we're seeing service centers in Oregon. There are now service type healing centers in Colorado. But here's the thing, whether you want to do a small dose or a large dose journey in these states, to do it legally, you have to report to these centers, right? And I think that provides kind of a level of safety for people who find the field to be daunting and they want professional support. But then there's a whole bunch of people that don't want to practice in this medical model, right? They want to be able to engage with these substances on their own, independently.
Now, I want to talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Because I did ayahuasca, and I did it with a psychologist. And when we went in, there was a very specific intent. All right, we talked about, then went on the journey, then there's a debriefing, and a journaling that happened. And when I think about people who are partying and they're on psilocybin, there's no, you haven't set the intention. And so is there is there less benefit by just partying with it, or doing it the way where you go in with a psychologist? What's the best way to do it?
Yeah. I mean, the best way to do it is the best way for you, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And within this space, we talk about how these medicines are so integrative and personalized, and they have to be practiced with that kind of mentality and approach. So when you're talking about a medicine like ayahuasca, this is like a highly ceremonial indigenous practice. So people aren't really partying with ayahuasca. That's like a medicine that you sit with, you prepare for, right? And there's a whole ceremony that's arranged around it. And sometimes there's multiple nights where they serve and you engage, and then there's a long integration process. And the same type of, I guess, concept can be applied to a medicine like psilocybin, the psilocybin mushrooms. But I think that the nature of the experience with psilocybin and the accessibility level means that people can also obtain them and use them recreationally in party and festival settings, right?
Sure.
And what I like to talk about is how the therapeutic medical setting and the recreational setting aren't that divided. Like the boundary between them is not as solid as we might think, because if you're practicing, or if you're using intention and responsibility with mushrooms, okay, going out into nature and going to a festival and listening to music and being with your friends and dancing and enjoying yourself is extremely therapeutic. So we got to talk about joy.
No, I want to talk about music and psilocybin, because you're big on that.
I am really big on that.
And then also, you're also big on the fact that what kind of music should you play while you're doing this? So
it's a big
let's
question.
talk about that.
We can. I will just say that people who are partying and using psychedelics without preparation and intention are going down a road that could be high risk. So whether you're doing
What do you mean by high risk?
Well, I mean, if these are powerful medicines, you know, just because they grow in the ground and they're natural doesn't mean that they have a lot of power on our psychology, on our neurology, on our body. So we have to be educated. We have to be responsible. And there are people that are predisposed to certain psychological conditions. And if they go overboard and they're not prepared and they're not taking into consideration that they might have predispositions to having severe adverse events, and they can find themselves, you know, in trouble. They can have psychosis. They could lead to other things. So it's about knowing yourself, educating yourself, being responsible. And if you want to take psychedelics in a recreational setting, do it, but be careful. Do your preparation, educate yourself, be responsible. And if you think that enjoyment is therapeutic, well, I think so too. So I'm not saying that it has to be medicalized. I'm saying that there's different points of access. So that's kind of how I feel about that.
Yeah. All right.
So, and then your question about music. So you want to know what kind of music?
Well, yeah. So when somebody is taking psychedelics, let's say psilocybin, what are some of the, and I know music is personal, but what is there a list of songs you find are helpful to move people through their journey?
Yeah.
Like,
it's my experience in like this, I guess, like the clinical setting. People like a musical journey that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. People tend to like a structure because the onset of the psychedelic tends to be like this slow climb, almost like this like peak, right? And that you ride this wave for a little while and then you come down. So if the music can guide the journey in that way, I think that's really powerful and needed. In terms of like what people choose for music, it's like you said, it's what speaks to them. I've encountered people who don't really have a preference as long as like they don't have to think about it and you give them something great, they're happy. Some people want nature sounds, some people want instrumental. I tend to see that lyrics are not always as popular because they can influence the journey with the words.
Oh,
and words
that makes sense. Yeah,
can be
absolutely.
very emotionally charged, right?
Yes.
That being said, I've experienced music that has been so profound in a psychedelic journey that had lyrics, and maybe because I'm more experienced, I liked it. Maybe someone who's more new.
Did it open up a different pathway in your brain in some way? Like,
it made me think.
Heard some words and all of a sudden it set off a series of thoughts.
Yeah. Like I remember listening to some Nina Simone, and she always has great things to say, right? And it made me think about the world. It made me think about the people in my life, but look, it guided the journey in a certain direction. It just happened to guide it in a direction that I appreciated.
All right.
But I, like on a personal level, I like to hear a lot of instruments. I like to hear very layered instrumental sounds.
Interesting.
to the point where it almost feels like the sounds have a texture. So it almost like you can touch them, like it's a different.
Synesthesia, they call that?
Yeah. And I think that from, what I've heard, people tend to enjoy that. Yeah.
Interesting. Very, very good. Now, is there any particular type of psilocybin that you prefer over other types for people to start their journey or to experiment with or to try?
Yeah.
And dosages that might be a good starting dosage?
Yeah, I don't tend to advise on dosing, but I will say start low and slow, because you could always take more, but you can't take less, right?
So microdose, just take a little piece of stuff and see what happens.
Yeah. Why? I mean, you don't have to go rip your consciousness open the first time, right? Like, just tread carefully, wade into the water, see how your body reacts. I think it's a great ritual to form, and it's almost like you're developing, you are developing a relationship with the psychedelic or with a plant, and you have to get to know it, and it has to get to know you. And so starting slow allows for that spaciousness to create a ritual instead of diving in head first. But I mean, if I think about it, the first time that I tried mushrooms, I went for that 3-gram dose.
You did? You went for a transcendental dose. So.
I just did it. It kind of was an accident, and then I looked at the piece of chocolate in my hand, and I was like, just do it.
Well, you talk about ripping your consciousness open. But before we get to that, like, how did this all? Are you Canadian?
I'm Canadian.
So you're in Canada, and you're working for Johnson and Johnson, and some other companies, I'm sure. Then one day, now all of a sudden, psychedelics come into your world. How did that happen?
So I have to go back before Johnson and Johnson.
Okay.
To that. So I studied neuropharmacology. I worked in the ICU with a pharmacy team, and my focus was brain injury.
Oh, really?
That was my focus. And
so neural genesis was a big thing with you, or then?
It was. Yeah. And my observation at the time was that we had these very complex brain injury patients.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, in the acute phase, they have a lot of mental health symptoms. They have like delirium and agitation. They have trouble sleeping, lots of personality disorders. So they're medicated with a lot of mental health medications. And that's kind of just how it is at the beginning. What I noticed was that years after the injury had healed, the physical injury, these patients, these people were still on the same types of drugs.
Why do you think that was?
Because we have no other options. This is all we have. The antipsychotics, the sedatives, things to make you sleep, things to make you wake up, right? Things to manage your depression, your anxiety, things to balance your mood. But the truth is that a lot of these medicines, as valuable as they may be in Western medicine, are Band-Aid solutions to symptoms, right? They're not looking at the whole person, and they're not offering a more curative root cause analysis.
Let's talk about the root cause.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's say psychedelics, the right kind, get you to the root cause so you can understand what your trauma or what it is that you need to get through.
Yeah. So it helps you develop a deeper understanding. It kind of moves the veil aside so you can really look at things with
We're going to talk about the veil in a second. That's a very interesting word you used.
A lot of people experience this ability to look at their lives with an objective lens, and the emotional load that they attach to the story is able to kind of be set aside so that they can do deep work and get to the bottom of the root cause, like you said. But there's other things at play too. There's neuroplasticity, which we tend to lose as we get older.
Well, okay, so do you think if you take psychedelics, it will retain that neuroplasticity?
There's a window of opportunity.
Explain that.
So when you're young, you're like a sponge, right? We hear this, right? So your neuroplastic brain is very resilient. It's like an open window. It's letting in the breeze, the laughter. Yeah, and it's not so much the neurons. It's like the ability to learn is just greater. There's more mental flexibility, more cognitive flexibility. But as we get older, this window of neuroplasticity tends to close, and there's a little bit more rigidity. So it's harder to learn.
At what age?
I don't think there's a particular age. I think it's with time.
Really?
I will say, though, women who are menopausal experienced a diminished amount of neuroplasticity. And that has to do with all kinds of things like hormones like estrogen and things like that that happen in the transition. Now, as we get older, our patterns become more rigid. It's harder to learn. But what's more important is that it's harder to unlearn. So if you experience a difficult moment in your life or a trauma, you get this maladaptive pattern that settles in. And now it's really hard to break that pattern.
So if you get that maladaptive pattern at an older age, it's going to be harder to break?
Yes, absolutely.
Why is that? What do you think?
It's the way we're wired.
The way we're wired.
The way we're wired. It's the way the brain works. Now, what psychedelics do, and you can achieve this not only with a psychedelic substance, because people achieve it with meditation, for example,
yes.
or with prayer and being able to enter these flow states, right? These different brain states. But psychedelics offer this ability to reopen the neuroplastic window. And that's when you go in and you do the therapy. That's that window where people do integration therapy and deep work with a facilitator or a coach or a therapist to really get in there and figure stuff out and make changes that are going to last a lifetime. So it's like the psychedelic substances are, people say that it's a bypass, and it is in a sort of bypass. It allows for this opportunity to arise that otherwise you might not be able to access.
And why do you think that folks are not able to access in a normal state and figure that out?
I think that a lot of us walk through life with blinders on and a diminished sense of awareness. And I think that we're not really paying attention. And it's not necessarily our fault, because society moves really fast and has distracted us and has deprioritized the things that are most important. And it's my observation that people who engage in things like meditation, yoga, psychedelics have increased their ability to be aware and dropped in and focused. It has prioritized their health, their wellness, the important people in their life. And it's almost like the blinders come off and you're paying attention to, quote unquote, the right things.
So
that's just kind of my experience, you know?
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
From my experience, it was ego.
And that's a good point.
The suppression of my ego was able to open up the doorways to seeing things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody talks about this ego death.
So I was going to do before I did the ayahuasca ceremony, I had a friend said he's got a dozen people he wants to do an ayahuasca ceremony at my house, and do you want to do it? And I said yes, but I had some medical tests, so I couldn't do it. But I watched everybody do this ayahuasca thing for 2 days. Wow. I interviewed every single one of them, like, what was it like? What happened? And they said, I came up against this ceiling or a bubble, and it felt like I was going to die. And I just said, fine, I'm going to die. And they I guess that's the ego death, or what they said. And they said, when I went to the other side, that's when I saw aliens, relatives, all sorts of spiritual creatures, and giving them guidance. And I saw this one guy, he was talking to this wooden horse for 3 hours. And I go, what was your conversation? He goes, oh no, we're all connected. I said, and I thought living things were all connected. He goes, oh no, dead, wood, doesn't matter. We are all one, we are all connected. It wasn't just one person that said it. All 12 had exactly the same kind of story. And it was really amazing, which leads me back to ripping your brain open.
Your
consciousness open, yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about that. What's that experience like for most people? And do they need multiple times to rip that consciousness open? How does that work?
I mean, it's all very personal, like you said earlier on, but you're right. A lot of people report like the same feelings. They report seeing the same things, experiencing the same things. So there's definitely, in this ego death, there is this sense of unity, this sense of oneness. A lot of people describe dissolving into nothing but being everything at the same time.
Yeah.
But that is it. It's this realization, whether you believe in a God or not, It's this realization that we all come from a common place. And that means that we are all connected somehow. And then that opens up the door to like collective consciousness and all of these really interesting, fascinating topics. And I was just talking to my brother about this just the other day, and we talked about how we will probably never really be able to speak about consciousness like we fully understand it. And I think I agree. I think we can get closer to grasping the concept of consciousness. But like, if I ask you to define consciousness, how, like, what would you say?
I would say we are all, consciousness is
It is hard.
yeah, it is difficult, but we are actually all one, and we are all connected. And okay, you saw Star Trek, right? And they have the shapeshifter guys, right? And they say that we go into like a pool of continuum where we have our individuality, but yet we are all one together. That's how I describe it.
That's how you describe it. Yeah. I mean,
that's the only way I can kind of explain it.
Right. And so we all have kind of this like definition, what it kind of means to us, how we think about it. But it's hard to describe consciousness like you would describe this table, you know? Like it's very abstract, and there's still so much to understand. But every time we get closer to this ego death or experience ego death or have these experiences, it feels like we get closer and closer to appreciating or having somewhat of an understanding of what consciousness could be. But for me, I mean, I heard Sam Harris say this. He was like, consciousness is not something that exists inside your head behind your eyes.
No, it's okay. I think without getting too crazy sounding here, it is our subconscious connected to the universe and everything. Right. That's what I believe it is.
Yeah.
And we can't access that subconscious part unless we have the help of psilocybin or some kind of psychedelic.
Or a psychedelic experience, which could also not involve a substance.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you talk to these monks that have just become these
I've heard about these ones, and they say they go really deep into meditation. Have you ever spoken to those guys or read about that, or what's that like?
I mean, I've read about it, and I've never spoken to someone who's been that expert of a meditator, but it seems that when I read about it, essentially within a fraction of a few seconds, they're able to like enter these deep theta brain states that are like your dream state, that are like the psychedelic state, and they're just so trained and practiced that they can access these parts of them. I've spoken to people who can recreate the psychedelic experience or like the psychedelic state without a substance.
Well, it's in our brain.
I mean, it's there.
Yeah. The chemicals are there.
It's there. I think it takes a lot of practice to get there. And I think some people can get there more quickly than others. But what I always say is once you experience a psychedelic, the outpouring of emotion and feeling that you have is a reminder that it exists innately within you. And you don't need to keep doing psychedelics for over and over and over and over again to access. So I think a lot of people get wrapped up in another ayahuasca trip, another this trip, another that. And it's really, you need to create space between experiences, because then you're just on another kind of roller coaster, another kind of rat race.
You need time to process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've done DMT as well, chaga. This guy, go to this guy's house in Malibu, and he goes, "Hey, you know what chaga is?" I go, "No." He goes, "You've done ayahuasca before?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, this is a natural form of DMT." So he gets his bong rig out. He pulls it up. He goes, "Okay, take a hit." I go, took one big hit. He goes, "Take another one." Took the second one. He goes, "Okay, now go lay down in the Chase Lounge." Now, I forgot to tell you this part. He has this Russian Doberman dog, which is a clone dog, by the way. Anyways, but this is what's weird. Dog ignores me, it's there, not bothering anyone. When I went over to Chase Lounge, the dog walks over to me, and he just stands there. I put my hand on his chest, and I took it off, and he crawled into my lap and sat on the Chase Lounge with me. That dog knew that I was connected to reality in a different way, in a way that he could understand. And from that experience, I say we are all connected.
I believe it.
Even the animals.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Especially the animals.
And I said, wow, they're in touch with probably a lot more closer to the universe than we are in reality.
Yeah.
In some ways.
I think like animals are also in tune with certain like emotional signals or prompts or things that humans don't always pay attention to.
This dog did.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
weird. It was,
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was an amazing experience. What about MDMA? Like a lot of folks take MDMA, and I've taken MDMA, and I've had some very deep conversations with people that I cared about.
That was my first psychedelic experience.
Really?
Yep. Yep. I mean, I had tried. I mean, cannabis.
Why do they classify MDMA as a psychedelic?
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not your classical psychedelic, right? But it does have an effect on your serotonergic system, 5-HT2A receptor, and so it's psychedelic-like. In my book, even though it doesn't fit in like the pharmacological category of a classical psychedelic, which would be like a mescaline or a psilocybin, right? It still is a psychedelic to me. I might not be having the most intense visual experience, but I think of psychedelics as substances or practices that have the ability to manifest the mind and reveal the soul. And I will tell you that the way MDMA makes a person feel is absolutely a psychedelic experience. It connects you to yourself, and it connects you further to the world around you.
Yeah.
You know, and so in my book, it absolutely falls within the category of psychedelics because that's what a psychedelic can do. And whether you are suffering from PTSD, whether you are trying to reconnect to yourself after having lived a trauma, whether it's couples therapy, it is one of the most fascinating molecules in terms of what it can do for humans. And I'm absolutely enamored by it. It's one of my favorites to talk about. I have a research project where we're going to be looking at MDMA for specific population within the field of neurology. And I just can't wait to see, hopefully, eventually some sort of legalization so that people can access it, because it's sad that it got knocked by the FDA last summer. We were all sad, but I think it was expected by many of us.
So there's a company called Cybin. Have you heard of them?
The company?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were working with the Defense Department with MDMA and psilocybin combinations for PTSD. What do you think about that as a combination?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so psilocybin has this...
And why psilocybin and MDMA? Why that combination?
Because psilocybin really evokes this like cathartic inward experience.
Okay.
Right? Like if you take psilocybin, I don't know about you, but many people report how they really go inward. It's quite the catharsis. It's quite the emotional ride. It makes people very sensitive. I always have this analogy of like these little memory drawers that just get opened, things you haven't thought about for a really long time, and like the socks just start spilling out of the drawers.
Yeah.
Right? And so a lot of people don't want to experience MDMA in the festival setting because of this, because it makes them very emotional. Like I'm one of those people. It's not a social festival, go dance your butt off type of medicine.
I tried it one time in a social setting where the music was, and it was like, this get me the hell out of here.
Yeah, I want to go think about my like childhood and like process some shit.
Yeah, right? Really, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Now, think about a person who is trying to move through something difficult. Of course, psilocybin can help you move through it. It's a fantastic tool. But if that person is highly emotional, if that person is holding to an emotional burden that is so strong that is keeping them from moving through their experience, we want to make things feel a little less heavy for them. MDMA, because of the dopamine, because of the norepinephrine, and because of the serotonin, this kind of like trifecta of like neurochemicals, it has an effect of an outpouring of joy, of love, of trust. You also have activation of oxytocin, right? And oxytocin is that like blissful, loving, trusting, bonding chemical.
That's right.
So when you pair those two together, you're able to move through some of these very difficult situations. You're able to shed this armor that people have that is really keeping them from like seeing themselves and loving themselves.
That armor could be their ego?
Of course it could be.
Yeah.
But
what
it could
else could
also,
it
It could be, you know, when we're talking about PTSD and we go back to this like maladaptive type of pattern, the brain is a predictive machine.
Really?
Okay. It's not a reactive machine.
Okay.
And one of my mentors gave me this example. So if like you're in the plains of Africa, right, and you see a lion, your brain's going to say, get the heck out of there, run, right? Your brain is not waiting to see the lion to then react. Your brain is already predicting that you might see the lion. So your cortisol, when you're on those plains of Africa, is already starting to climb, and the fight or flight status is already starting to engage. That way, when you see something that you need to run from, it doesn't take 10 seconds to react. You're already reacting. So if we go back to this predictive machine that the brain is, your brain is always taking in experiences and stimuli and is making predictions about environment, about how to react. So if you have PTSD, it's because you lived through a trauma. Now your brain has taken that trauma and has created essentially this like story in your brain.
Yeah, a movie.
So, right. And every time there is something that is minutely reminiscent of that experience, you're going to have this big blown out reaction. Right? So that's the maladaptive pattern that I'm talking about.
That's the trigger they call?
Yeah, trigger, exactly. In these situations, the armor that you have is this anger, frustration, sadness, this maladaptive pattern that is not only keeping you from moving on and letting go of this story and the trigger, but it's also a armor that is keeping you from loving yourself, from trusting
You're being
yourself.
Stuck.
You are stuck.
Yeah.
That's this armor.
How do you unstick yourself? What's the best way of unsticking yourself that you know of right now?
For something like this?
Yeah.
I really do think it's MDMA.
Okay.
I really do think it's psychedelics. Time and time again, we have seen that regular talk therapy, SSRIs, and anxiety medication is not truly helping a person heal their post-traumatic stress disorder.
It's blunting them.
It's numbing them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's numbing them so that they don't feel so much. But it's not just about not feeling. We want to feel. It's about addressing that root cause and figuring out how to relearn to react to situations that might be triggers.
Do you think our education system, both in Canada and the U.S., does not set our brains up in the right manner to process information in a way that would help us rather than hinder us?
Somewhat.
I'm like, this is.
You're like, yeah.
Yeah. The school system was
better.
raised for the Industrial Revolution
We can do better.
to make workers, and I will tell you this: I've been around different countries and spoke to different cultures, and so far I haven't been to all, not 196 countries, and if you include the Vatican, but
Yes.
the Jewish religion and the Torah is probably one of the best programming methodologies that I've seen for the human brain. That gets people, gets them through life better than what we're taught here in America. Like, they never teach us about internal locus of control here. They ever talk about that? Or external locus of control and emotional regulation and how to keep yourself calm and that. They don't teach us this stuff.
Right, like tools from childhood that you should have.
Proper tools. I mean, this is a quantum computer, and no one that I'm aware of in the United States has ever handed a parent go, here's the programming manual for the computer you just created. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And it should.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's almost like
doing better.
forbidden information. But this information is out there, and how reality is versus what we think. And a lot of people, I hired some people out of the intelligence community to teach me where my vulnerabilities were. And they taught me things that it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Your brain really thinks that way and looks at the world that way. And this is how it really is versus what you were taught.
Right. We are schooled to be productive. That I believe.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's a mistake.
Let's talk about that, because when we were young, We have a lot of extra neurons. That's why we can learn all these different languages. We're super creative. And then when we get older, some folks hold on to that creativity, but a lot of folks don't.
Yeah. I'm the perfect example of that. And I'll tell you why. Growing up, it was like, I love the arts. My parents put me in all kinds of like music. I grew up playing the violin.
Really?
I loved to sing. I loved the piano, though my focus was the violin for some reason. I don't know why, that I let go later on. But I was very artistic, but I also liked sports and I also liked science. So I was this very well-rounded kid.
Okay.
And as I got older, it felt like there was no space to take some of these like creative activities and really hold on and continue to cultivate them. So it felt like all my musical hobbies were kind of left to the wayside. Could I still sing? Sure. Was I still in violin lessons? No. After the age of 16, I wasn't interested anymore, and I didn't replace it with anything else. All the choir and the singing groups and the art classes, I wasn't doing them anymore because I was so hyper-focused on getting into a good program in university. And it felt like all of my brain power had to go towards studying and being like a really good scientist, right? And it's like there was no space for my creative brain. And I even oscillated right before college in Quebec, where I grew up in Montreal. You do 2 prep school years before you go on to college. So you kind of like choose your concentration. And at the last minute, I said, just kidding. I'm not going into science anymore. I don't want to be a doctor. I'm going to go into liberal arts. I want to be a writer. I found a joy for writing in my last year of high school. I love to write poetry. I like to write like journalistic articles. I loved to write, and I was like, I'm going to be a writer. So my parents kind of freaked out and were like, no. And they said, okay, fine, do it, but just do math. So I did a year of liberal arts, and I loved it. I mean, we learned about the classics. I did sacred writings. I did all kinds of really amazing things. And somehow after that year, I ended up back in science, and clearly I pursued my schooling in science, ended up in science. But when I graduated college and after my graduate degree and after I moved to LA, something kind of appeared in front of me. And that was all of the people, all of the creative people in LA that were right in front of my face doing really interesting things. Not only one career, 2 careers, taking their passions and making careers out of them. You have music. I mean, LA is such a hub for the creative, the artist, right? So I was surrounded by all of these really cool, creative people. And it made me realize that I had essentially outcasted all of the creative passions that I had and that they were greatly missing. And so began this quest to bring all of the art back into my life. And so I deliberately, I bought a piano, started playing again.
Wow.
My neighbor was an incredible piano player, so she became my teacher. I started writing again. I started exploring that whole sphere, and slowly things just began to change for me. I no longer wanted to work for Johnson & Johnson. I had all of these really amazing ideas about what I wanted to do with my career. My entrepreneurial creative side was engaged. Things that were probably always within me, but that I stopped paying attention to. And so it makes me realize that the way our system is formed for education and career kind of like forces people to just be one-track mind most of the time. And so now, I'm out of school. I'm a fully developed adult and I can do whatever I want, right? So I've brought that stuff back. And I think that that's important. I mean, psychedelics were a part of that.
So psychedelics help bring you back to a creative state in your life.
It was definitely a part of it. Yeah, there were like other experiences, like moving to LA was a huge catalyst for that. Like,
how long you been here for?
7.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So I moved to the West Side, and I was like in Santa Monica, Venice, meeting really interesting people. It was a huge inspiration. And then I think psychedelics, absolutely. I mean, they open your mind. They allow you to see things that you might not be able to see. They increase your level of awareness. And that's
self-awareness.
And but also awareness to the things that are going on around you.
You think so?
I
You
think
think
so.
you pay more attention to what's going around you?
Yeah.
So you have more situational awareness as well.
I think so. I think I've
And also in
been
LA,
able.
you should have situational awareness.
You need situational awareness. I think I became more like in tune with people, a greater understanding of people. I think I developed more compassion.
Aha, that's what I was going to. Boy, kindness and compassion. Did you find after psychedelics, you had more kindness and compassion to humans?
Yeah, totally.
How were you before? How are you after?
I was not an unkind person, but
Okay.
I was more impatient.
Okay.
I'm a stubborn person.
Really? Okay.
The Taurian brain is strong.
Okay. All
I'm
right.
still a stubborn person, but before it was very much my way or the highway. And if people didn't meet my expectation, it would cause me a lot of turmoil and frustration.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you think there was?
I don't know. Nurture and nature. I don't know.
It's okay. So I was very similar to like it was my way and my way is the right way and that's it. And
That still exists in me. It's not completely gone.
Okay, all right,
But I'm
that's fair.
open.
Fair enough.
There's an openness that didn't exist before.
okay.
And I want to hear what people have to say. And I'm way more adaptable and flexible than I used to be. And like I said, I was never unkind, but I have this patience about people. And my philosophy has changed in the sense that now, when someone doesn't meet me where I'm at, or if someone lets me down or disappoints me, I don't feel like it's personal anymore. I've just realized that everyone has their own capacity and everyone is operating within their own capacity. And if yours is different than mine, that's okay. We're just going to adapt our relationship. Maybe we'll be these types of friends instead of those types of friends. Or maybe we won't be business partners. We'll just be friends, you know?
Sure.
So it's just given me like an openness and a patience that I just didn't have before.
You're in LA and now you have an openness. Has it ever gotten you in trouble, that openness?
No.
Or does it give you a sense of who that person really is a lot easier than before the psychedelics?
Yeah. I've always been a very highly intuitive person, even
Okay.
from a young age. Kind of witchy, I would have to say.
Oh, you're a Wiccan?
Maybe.
All right.
But I feel like I'm able to sense and catch a vibe off of people pretty quickly.
Okay.
I feel like I've always paid attention.
Do you think it's accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And again, in the spirit of being open, I give people a chance. Like I don't make snap judgments about people, but I'm taking in information. And I'm continuing to always take in information from the very first meeting until the 100th.
I have a theory, and that is when you walk into a room of people, that your subconscious is in connection with their subconscious, and you know the room better than what you believe you do. And you go in there and you can read. I think everybody has the capacity, unless, of course, there's some kind of a accident happened or something, or a brain injury or something, that subconscious is there and it's alert, and if you listen to it, it will
Tell you things.
tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Tell you things that you're.
I think we all have the capacity for that. I think some people are more in tune, and then it goes back again to the awareness. It's like when you walk into a room and just let's say there's something off, and you're like, I think I want to leave. I don't want to be here. But are there people that don't get that download? Yeah, there are people that aren't truly paying attention. There are signs everywhere, and our subconscious is picking up signs and information all the time, and it's storing it. And sometimes it comes to the forefront where you realize it and you become aware of it, and sometimes it just stays back there. And when you think of dreams, I think dreams are often the manifestation of the subconscious. It's like what's stored is now coming to the forefront. And when you wake up and you're like, why did I dream that?
Yeah.
Why did you dream that? Think about it. Put the pieces together. Dreams are an extension of your reality.
Cannabis. I use cannabis to go to sleep. And one of the things that cannabis does when you go to sleep is it wipes out most of your dreams. And so that's great for people with PTSD.
Yeah.
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 Because the nightmares, it takes away the nightmares.
Yeah, it's helpful.
Yeah, I was in Ukraine, in Kiev, probably about 8 months ago.
Okay.
I was talking to the deputy health minister, and one of my big pushes was to get cannabis for sleeping, because they didn't have it for sleeping. They had it for a bunch of other stuff, but not sleeping. I said, you really, with the soldiers, here's the reason why you want to have it for sleeping. And then I sent them a bunch of university studies after that. Now it's
The seed
sleeping.
has been planted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's going to help a lot of soldiers in a lot of ways. Cannabis, I believe, will help a lot of people who have PTSD. And there's the thing about getting to the root of the PTSD and curing it. That's a whole other subject. But at least what happens is you have so many nightmares that you don't want to go to bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're in this downward spiral instead of an upward spiral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to see a few initiatives to try to advance psychedelic therapies for traumatized soldiers
Yeah.
and veterans. And I think that it's very much needed. I mean, it's not just in Ukraine. There was Syria.
Oh, there's 144 conflicts going on right now that people don't even know about. Africa, yeah, you're right. Yeah, so many things that are going on in people's lives. And not even war, inside their homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard not to get overwhelmed by the state of the world.
So MDMA, have you ever tried different analogs of MDMA? Because I know psilocybin is working with different analogs of MDMA along with psilocybin.
Yeah.
Have you ever anything about that?
I know a few.
I know very little about that.
I know a few. I have, there's like Shulgin that developed a lot of different designer type compounds.
Yeah.
And I know that people are researching to see the differences and the different type of like therapeutic applications. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I haven't really, had a lot of personal experiences. Access is definitely
It's hard to get. I know.
Yeah, there's some that people have told me like, oh, you really got to try this, and I'm like, great, can you give it to me? Like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the different categories of psychedelics that are out there? So people are listening to go, they think it's all about psilocybin, but we talked about psilocybin, MDMA, ayahuasca, but there's other psychedelics.
Yeah. So one here that I think could be really interesting to talk about is ketamine, because ketamine is accessible.
Is ketamine considered a psychedelic as well?
It is considered a psychedelic in the sense, in the same kind of way that like MDMA doesn't fall really into that category, right? But ketamine is actually, when you're talking about visuals and like, sensations and sensorial effects, ketamine is like more psychedelic than MDMA.
Really?
It's a dissociative.
Yes, it is.
It's an NMDA receptor antagonist.
Really?
And it works on the glutamate system, which is another neurotransmitter.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about depression, we've seen that some people who do suffer from depression have low levels of glutamate. So right away, if you give someone who has major depressive disorder or treatment-resistant depression 1 dose of ketamine, they will experience instant relief. But it's not just about that one time, right? We want to practice it as like a psychedelic-assisted therapy, so you want multiple sessions. Integration. But the dissociative nature gives you a complete, now depending on the dose, of course, but if you have a full dose, you will experience.
So what's a full dose, half dose considered?
Yeah.
Does it go by body weight?
Yeah. So in medical practice, we use different forms of ketamine. There's injectable ketamine, which goes right into the blood system if it's an IV infusion or an intramuscular injection. And these ketamine-assisted therapy clinics are mostly practicing with injectable ketamine. But there's also sublingual and there's also nasal. And the nasal is just got FDA approval, and it's a Johnson & Johnson drug. So, of course, Big Pharma has hopped on the bandwagon.
So what does ketamine do that you said is a dissociative? Okay, fine. So what does that mean?
So it's an anesthetic that has been used for a very long time in the ERs.
Okay.
It's very safe. It's very fast acting. When I say safe, I mean that we know a lot about it and we know how
Okay.
to practice with it. Ketamine does have an addictive potential.
It does.
It does.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So it's case per case. You know, people who come in seeking ketamine therapy for substance abuse disorders,
Oh, really?
they do, because it can work, but it's a case per case basis. A lot of practitioners will want to understand what substance the person is misusing.
Sure.
Is it opiates or is it alcohol? Because ketamine can feel very similar to heroin. It is that kind
Oh,
of,
really?
it can. It's an out of body experience. It's very light. It's very pleasant. And so what we want to avoid is someone now becoming addicted to that feeling and wanting to essentially shift over to ketamine and become drug seeking and obtain it on the street in an unsafe way. So when it comes to addiction and ketamine, it can be practiced, but it's case per case. We're seeing ketamine for depression, for anxiety, for PTSD, for OCD, because OCD is it's a control disorder. It's a rigidity disorder.
Okay.
And the dissociative nature of ketamine can help kind of relax that rigidity.
For how long? Because I heard that you got to do it again, and it only lasts so long, and you got to go have another session.
Yeah, it's my experience that 6 to 8 sessions over the course of anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks is
Really?
what people are doing. That's kind of a standard.
And that snaps them out of it for good, or is it a temporary thing?
It depends. Some people come back yearly for boosters
Okay.
because it helps their mood. Other people don't come back and they feel that it's helped them. But it also depends on like the nature of the issue. You know, how complex is the issue? How severe is the disorder? Like, this is the thing about psychedelics that all of these providers and facilitators are realizing, is that it's not one size fits all. So it's a huge investment of energy and time and skill to work with people. You really got to get to know them. And now we're finding that certain psychedelics, even ketamine, can help with women's health issues.
Really? How so?
Because there's a relationship between both glutamate, the neurotransmitter that ketamine affects, and estrogen.
Okay.
And there's also a relationship between serotonin and estrogen.
Okay.
So knowing where a woman is in her cycle, because estrogen rises and falls twice during our cycles,
Okay.
could actually be very useful when it comes to the psychedelic experience and the therapeutic benefit of these medicines.
So women, while they are menstruating, are more sensitive to MDMA or psychedelics? Or what does that mean?
So when estrogen is high, so estrogen rises twice, once in the mid-follicular phase and again in the mid-luteal phase.
Okay.
So here's an example. When we're perimenopausal, our estrogen, testosterone, progesterone levels start to lower, to decrease. And then when we hit menopause, they're kind of at this all-time low. So women who experience perimenopause start to experience mood disorders and a slew of other things in this transition. There has been a lot of anecdotal evidence that taking low doses of psilocybin, for example, in the luteal phase can help balance out some of those mood issues, can kind of lift the mood, help with the depressive symptoms, help with all of that. Now, empirical evidence, it's what's being studied. Women's health is finally having a moment. A lot of people are funding studies and are trying to understand our beautiful biochemistry and trying to find the opportunities for innovations with plant medicines and psychedelics so that we can better serve the women's community. Because up until now, it's pretty shitty, if I'm being honest. Women are excluded from clinical trials because our biology is more complex.
Well, then have a trial with men, have one with women,
I know,
and one with
right?
both.
It seems so simple, but it's just the reality that women often get left out, or that the eligibility criteria is so stringent that women tend to get left out. And the other thing is that these studies that include both men and women aren't really taking into account specifically women's biologies and how it can really affect how a drug affects us. So there needs to be more targeted studies for women, and there just needs to be better therapeutics, because things like postpartum and menopause have just been medicalized and rendered a singular hormonal event, and it's not it. It's existential, it's psycho-emotional, it's neurological, and we need more than just HRT.
Us men, we need help.
We just need men to support us. We just need men to support us.
I know,
But there's
true.
opportunities. There's opportunities, especially that psychedelics can help with, like the grief and the identity. Like when a woman goes through menopause, right? You're grieving.
No, tell me about that. Explain that.
I mean, I have
Explain
not
that
gone
to the
through.
audience.
Sure, I've not gone through menopause yet, but it is my experience that this transition can be very difficult. There is a decrease in our felt sense of vitality. We are grieving the end of our periods, even though our periods have annoyed the hell out of us our whole lives, but we can no longer bear children. Our sexual libido goes down. We become disinterested in men sometimes. We can have suicidality. I know, it sucks. You think women after 50 don't want to have sex? Of course they want to have sex, but their biology and their chemistry is like fighting against them. So we need, it sucks.
We got to fix this.
We got to fix this.
Yes.
I've heard stories where all of a sudden perimenopause can hit a woman unexpectedly in their 40s, and they're just kind of looking at their partners like, oh my God, I cannot stand you anymore.
Oh my gosh.
And that is so alarming to women. There have been marriages that have ended because of the perimenopause, menopausal transition. And that sucks because these are family systems. These are caregivers to children. And I'm glad we're talking about this because I was at South by Southwest last week, and all the talks that I gave were about women's health and psychedelics. And so many women in the audience, you could see they were like, yes.
What's the biggest takeaway that a woman should know about psychedelics and how it can help them when they're premenopausal or menopausal or postmenopausal?
There's a few things. I think the first thing that they need to know is that they need to invest in understanding their bodies and their cycles. I think a lot of people just kind of throw it to the wayside and they don't address it until there's a problem. I think there's great value in journaling and understanding how you move through your cycle through life, because women are going to change a lot. We don't just change when we hit puberty. We change again between puberty and motherhood. We change again after we've given birth. We change again after our 40s. And if we keep waiting till there's a problem to seek information and education, then it's always going to be extremely overwhelming. So think about menopause when you're 30 or when you're 25, not from fear and anxiety, but from a place of wanting to inform yourself and be empowered and have agency. I think I think that's what it is. Because then if you don't want to take the hormones and the birth control and the this and the that, then you're empowered with information to go to your doctor and say, what about psychedelics? What about psilocybin?
They must look at you like you're from Mars if
Some
you
of
already
them
went to
do.
a doctor here. Like that's so on the fringe right now.
Right. But then the more the patients ask their doctors about a certain topic, the more it's going to clue in the doctors to go educate themselves. And unfortunately, our system is so freaking broken that doctors have barely 20 minutes to give to their patients.
What's it like in Canada? Is it different in Canada between the doctors and patients versus here? What have you seen?
It's kind of the same. It's kind of the same. Everyone's strapped. Everyone's underfunded. Everyone is strapped for time and energy, and everyone's exhausted. And it's all about productivity, not because the doctors want it to be this way, but because they have no choice. And if women want to have a discussion with their healthcare provider about their hormones, about their periods, about all these kinds of things, they need to schedule an appointment specifically around those topics. Because when it's your yearly, your annual, you're not going to have the time to
What
ask your
about
doctor
an OB-GYN versus a functional medicine doctor?
Yeah, I mean,
which one do you do both?
Both. And I've had an experience. What clued me into women's health was a couple of things, but one of it was that I saw a functional medicine specialist who gave me a traditional Chinese medicine blend.
Really?
To help with my PMS because it sucked and I was over it. And I wasn't going to do another birth control situation because I was over it. And I rolled my eyes and I was just like, this isn't going to help me. But it did help me. It really did help me. And it reminded me that there is plant power.
Oh, yeah.
And there's certain plants that are evidence and science backed, and we need to be looking at these plants. And it's not to replace necessarily other medicines or interventions, but it's to have the option. Like if you want to do a traditional Western medical treatment, cool. But if you don't, what's your option?
Yeah.
And that's where psychedelics and plant medicines come into play. It's like another tool in the toolbox. And we should have the right to try other things. Right?
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about the toolbox of psychedelic tools that are out there.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know all the tools that are out there.
Right.
So
we were talking about ketamine and we kind of lost
ketamine,
the thread.
Yeah, we covered that.
Yeah.
MDMA. Peruvian fire. I forgot what that's called, but
The Peruvian.
it's there's peyote
Yeah.
and there's but that's mescaline based. Isn't
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
there is Huachuma, which is San Pedro, which is
San Pedro. That's what I was
the
thinking.
grandfather,
Yes.
which I've explored personally pretty extensively, which has been very interesting.
When you say the grandfather, because they said that ayahuasca is female.
Yes.
And they wanted me to
Grandmother.
quit smoking weed for 15 days. I said, well, that's how I go to sleep. I'm not going to do that. And this is what
I'm going through this right now,
this
by
is what
the
the
way.
psychologist said. Said that ayahuasca is a jealous lover because they're both female plant-based plants. And then you have a male plant. You have some like this toad. You can get... Yeah, I've never done the toad, but that's supposed to be like a male energy. You should only do it one time, they say, to get the experience.
There's a lot of they say, right?
They say.
There's a lot of they say.
I want to answer what the they say. That's what you're here.
So in general, it's not so much like that ayahuasca is a jealous lady and that cannabis is another lady. It's just that when you're entering these powerful plant medicine experiences, you want to be pure. You don't want to have other chemicals.
So what about vitamins? You just like no vitamins, no nothing for a while.
But vitamins kind of like enter your body and like they're excreted pretty quickly.
Yes, they are.
Right. But supplements that are psychoactive and that kind of stay in the body that could influence your body. I don't know. I think about trying to think of
5-TTP or whatever the heck.
5-HTP. 5-HTP is like it's like a precursor that helps you produce more serotonin. In general, what they're saying is, what the message is we want our bodies to be in the purest state so that there's nothing in us that will be interacting and influencing the medicine that you're seeking to have an experience with. You want that medicine to be able to work on your body, mind, and spirit, period, full stop. And if you have other medicines like cannabis, like psilocybin, other medicines that have different mechanisms of action and that can influence your neurochemistry in your body, right? Then they're going to intervene and possibly clash with the medicine that you're going to sit with, like ayahuasca. That's why they give you these dietas, right? They say low-fat foods, not a lot of meat,
there's a diet.
She
sent me a diet and said, here's the foods I want you to eat, which I did.
Right. And when you see people at their ayahuasca journey that are non-stop purging, I mean, that could also greatly be because they just didn't do that dieta and cleansing, and their body is now rejecting a lot of these things. You know, eating heavy, salty, fatty foods. In general, that's going to interfere with how your body metabolizes a substance, right? So they always say observe like an alkaline diet, eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, be hydrated, not a lot of salt, not a lot of meat, things that your body can process, metabolize, excrete very easily. Forget the processed sugars. People weren't eating like that back then anyways.
It's true.
Right? Yeah. So for at least a couple weeks, if you can observe that kind of diet.
So what else we got in our toolbox?
What else we got? So we said Huachuma, we said the mescalines, the peyotes, LSD. That's a great one.
LSD and then, sure.
LSD is really interesting because it is dopaminergic and serotonergic.
Okay.
It's also interesting. I always get this kind of like visual of LSD fitting into its receptor, like a key going into a lock and kind of getting jammed in there.
Okay.
That's why the LSD trip tends to last a long time.
As it gets jammed in there for longer.
It kind of gets stuck in there for longer. It's really interesting.
So one of the experiences, I have a friend who's an artist and musical artist, and he took a lot of LSD when he said he was 14, 15, 16. Hasn't done a lot of it now, but some of the artwork that he creates and the visions that he had from that time is pretty amazing, and has made him super creative.
Yeah. There's an organization called Minds, led by Bruce Damer. Their whole thing is about funding studies around creativity, because we're funding a lot of studies around therapeutics, mental health, which is extremely important. But there's something to be said about the creative brain and how we can optimize as humans if we are more creative. How we can do more if we are creative. Like give a bunch of psychedelics to these AI engineers and see what they come up with.
What do you think they would come up with?
I mean, I think they would like take leaps. I think we would be like.
I heard that they already are on. They like. I heard a lot of these coders and all these guys that they are. They should be. They microdose and do all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm more of an out of the box thinker.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've seen these like images, these fMRI images that show the boundaries between brain networks dissolving. So you've got parts of the brain that don't technically always communicate with each other suddenly.
That's why you get synesthesia. You got different areas of your brain connecting with each other. And so it's going to open up way more creativity.
Right. And so creativity, problem solving, critical thinking.
Critical thinking.
How do you approach a problem? How do you find the solution? I feel like I find solutions to problems
I've always used to look like personal problems to figure out, right? But I never figured out to try to use it to figure out the new ad campaign or something like this.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's the kind of thing where like you're like, let me take some psilocybin and figure out my ad campaign. I think it's like over time. I think like your trip from like last year could help you figure out your ad campaign today.
So you think 18 months ago when I did my ayahuasca, I'm still processing.
Yeah, and it's also changing. It's
morphing
molding
me.
you.
Yes,
you're always changing, and so now you're approaching problems or situations with new lenses. And that's the out of the box thinking. So you can arrive at solutions and gain ideas and insights that maybe you wouldn't have been able to achieve if you hadn't had that experience.
What about ibogaine?
Oh, yes.
Listen, I've military people who've done it, non-military people who I've talked to who have done it. They say it's hell for 24 hours. Like they go
quite the experience.
They said it's like it's an e-ticket ride, and they go it was brutal to go through the 24 hours. But they're glad that they did it, and they said pretty much every trauma you could imagine came up, and they had to deal with it, and you deal with it very, very, very fast. When I was in ayahuasca, one of the things was parents, big issue, and so I thought my biggest issue was with my mom. First thing that came up was my father. Oh. I was like, ding. Okay, got it. Okay, come on, Mama. And she took about 3 or 4 seconds to figure out. Done. Brother, all the choices, a lot of things. It was very interesting.
The answers are there. The information is there.
Well, I couldn't access it until I did ayahuasca.
You couldn't access it, but it was there. Because where did it just manifested out of thin air? No, it's there. But we are not always in tune to it. And so it's the beautiful thing. It's really the thing about these medicines is that all of a sudden the information is brought forward. But ibogaine was really interesting to me.
Wait, hang on.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Do you think the information is always there, or are we connected to a higher power that is giving us the information, cluing us in?
That's hard. I don't know. I think about that.
I think we do. I think it connects us to another reality, that it opens up a portal in our brain that allows this knowledge to come in that we didn't have, or in your case, suppressed. But it's like, oh, I never thought about that.
It's suppressed information, or it's unprocessed information, and somehow
unprocessed information. Interesting.
This is what I think, and somehow it's stored, and we gain access to it, and there's pieces sometimes that are separate and they come together, and now you have a fully formed process, idea, or thought, or conclusion, or realization. Whether there's information that exists somewhere outside of us, and there's some sort of higher power, spirit, angel, guide that is supplying it to you, I don't know.
Yeah, I met aliens.
Aliens?
Yeah, same ones that I flatlined in an operating room. Met the same dudes.
And you saw the same dudes. Yeah. Well, because a lot of that chemistry, a lot of those chemicals that DMT chemical.
Yeah.
It's there when you're about to die,
Yeah.
and it's there when you're drinking ayahuasca.
Oh, yeah.
So there's something to be said about these common experiences that people have with entities. Like, are they in a parallel plane that you now can go walk on?
Man, I don't know.
I don't know. It's really
I was in
fascinating.
space. That's all I know.
It's incredible. So you saw the same,
And I was greeted.
the same people.
Yeah, yeah.
When did they greet you by name?
They smiled.
They were like, "Hey,
No,
again."
they didn't greet me by name, but they smiled. There's 5 of them looking at me and smiling at me.
I know. What is that?
And I'm like going, "Hey, how you doing?" That was it.
It's one of the biggest questions. That's why they're doing the extended DMT IV infusions.
What the heck is that? Tell me about that.
They're like hooking people up to making it sound really non-scientific, but it is. It's very scientific and rigorous. But they are essentially using an IV form of the DMT and trying to create extended experiences, because DMT is quite short.
Yeah,
when
10,
you
15
smoke it.
minutes. That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're trying to keep people in this plane
Really?
so that they can figure out who the heck are these entities.
Do you think the military's using it for extended things to open people's reality for like things like who knows what?
Who knows? Who knows? But I think these people, I think they're in the Bay Area or they're somewhere here close by. I'm forgetting the name of the organization.
And so wait a minute. I can go in with this organization and I can have DMT put into my veins and I can have an extended period. How long is that extended period for?
As long as they want to keep you on it.
Really?
Yeah.
It could be half hour, 45 minutes?
I'm sure it could be even 2 hours. I don't know for a fact. Don't quote me, but I'm
Holy
assuming.
moly.
And there even, I heard, I don't quote me on this either, but I heard from someone, it was a colleague of mine, that said that they're now also doing joint experiences where you and I would both be hooked up. And are we meeting each other?
Yeah, no, I've heard this. I've heard that if you go in as a couple and you do ayahuasca or a psilocybin experience, that the two of you will bond closer. And again, this is with the subconscious, I think meeting each other and greeting each other and talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have no true scientific explanation for this, but I don't think we need one. I feel like sometimes when we try to explain everything with science, we're just like being very reductionist, but it is a true experience that people who have journeyed together with these plant medicines have either met each other in some sort of common plane or seen the same types of spirit guides.
Yeah.
You know, someone told me once that she journeyed with a group of girls. They all saw lions, all of them. What? Why?
Wow.
Yeah. So yes, but why? It's one of these mysteries.
As a group experience, and they all had the same experience vision.
Yeah. At one moment in time, they all had these lion spirit guides appear to them.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you think that was about? We don't know.
I mean, it also begs the question, like, is this group bonded? Like, are they sharing a similar life experience?
And are they bonded tightly together longer in life? Do they stay friends longer? Do they communicate closer once they've had this bonded experience? I'm curious about that.
There's an infinite number of questions like this to research. We need more research.
What do you think?
I think so.
I think so too. I absolutely think so.
I absolutely think
so.
Like
the bond becomes tighter.
How can it not?
Yeah.
How can it not? And even without psychedelics, don't you have some friends that you're kind of inexplicably close and you're kind of like, did we know each other in a past life? Why do I know you so well? Why are we the way we are? You know, I have a friend that I've known since I was 9 years old, and we're convinced that like in other lives we were in other kinds of relationships. Maybe we were siblings, maybe we were lovers, I don't know, but there's like this unspoken ability for us to communicate. We just happen to know how we're feeling. Maybe you're
scientists together.
Maybe he's not a scientist. But yes, I do believe in that. You know, ibogaine, because you spoke about ibogaine, is being researched for traumatic brain injuries.
Yeah. Oh, traumatic brain injuries?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it has the ability, unlike any other drug so far, to heal the traumatic brain injury and I'm not talking about healing the physical injury, because what we suffer from after a head injury, it's no longer, if it's a mild, because this was mild TBI, if it's a mild injury and the focal impact injury has healed and we're still suffering after that, that is a brain network disorder. Now the networks in the brain are aberrant, and they're causing the predictive brain to overpredict or underpredict, and that causes all kinds of hormonal imbalances, because it starts with cortisol. Cortisol is too high, cortisol is too low. That affects your whole adrenal system and all of the other hormones. So people who are doing research in this field, including one of my mentors, is that we're exploring functional neurological disorders, which means that it's not just about the neurological impact. It's not about the physical injury. It's about the impact on the psycho-emotional piece of it.
Let's talk about that more, because I think a lot of people will benefit from psychedelics, of all the what's in the toolbox for their psychological traumas that they've had. Most of those traumas happen between the age of 2 and 9 years old, when they're young, and they're not even aware of it, and it causes them to have interpersonal challenges that they're not even aware of that they're doing.
Yeah. And then if you mix in something like a head injury or a spine injury, for example, that's traumatic in itself. And we don't really have solutions for these people.
Yeah. Part of our brain goes actually down into our spine down here.
Of course it does. So again, it's not that psychedelics are like the answer to everything, but there seems to be so many applications.
But when you talk about this traumatic brain injuries, so what's happening is the area is still damaged, but there's new neural pathways being rerouted and connecting to different parts of the brain that will have that can help out or aid that person to get to where they need to get to.
Yeah, because you have severe head injuries and you have less severe ones. Obviously, when you have a severe one, the actual blow, the inflammation, bleeding, that is damaging the brain physically. So that's a whole other category, right? You have people who have personality changes. You have people who have loss of language. You have people who, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but like if you ask them to draw a clock, maybe they'll only draw half the clock. So like their visual cortex is affected and how they process visual information. So that's with the more severe injuries. But if we're just looking at concussion and mild TBI, things that many of us have suffered from, you don't have to be an athlete to suffer from that. You can just slip and fall. You can be a kid on a skateboard. You can be on a bike, right? Yeah. You can be in a car and have a car accident. These more mild forms of head injuries, after those heal and the physical part of the brain isn't affected anymore, what you're left with are these disordered brain networks. And this goes back to the ability of psychedelics to kind of reorganize and desynchronize our brain networks.
You use the word desynchronize our brain networks. What is that? What are you talking about there?
I'm talking about what I had mentioned before, which is the boundaries between brain networks kind of melting away and allowing for communication between brain networks that we don't see when we're not on a psychedelic.
I know that when I do a microdose, call it medium dose, I might do a gram or a gram and a half, the next day, my brain is crystal clear.
It's like hit the refresh button for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder what that is. Why is it?
It's being studied, but I don't know if you've seen a lot of microdosing studies. They're not great.
No, I haven't seen a lot.
Yeah, they're not great. A lot of research is showing that it's not any better than placebo, but all of these stories.
BS to that.
I say BS
listen,
too.
Take a microdose and then you tell me, and take a placebo and tell me that you'll feel the difference.
I know. I agree. I'm the research director of a nonprofit here in LA called the Microdosing Collective.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Let's talk about Microdosing Collective. Where is this located? What's the address? Where can I go?
We don't really have a physical, but we're a nonprofit. We've got, I want to say, more than like 300 members, and we're active in policy and research. We are trying to create the ability to microdose, low dose psilocybin right now is our focus, without having to have a prescription, without having to report to a doctor's office, but still creating a framework where there is education, there's harm reduction, there's a medical evaluation, psychedelic or psychological evaluation to make sure that microdosing psilocybin is safe for you, but then allowing people to do it like they do it, a regimen, a ritual, just like they take supplements, right? There's these protocols where you microdose 3 or 4 days on, 3 or 4 days off. There's a lot of...
And does it tell you what strain of mushroom?
Yeah, I mean, it's very strain dependent. You got to find your flow with your strain, right? Because different strains, different potencies, different, feelings. You've got like...
So you should definitely go to a professional when you're going to do this.
You just got to be educated, right? And there's a lot of resources, but I think that if we created a framework within the state of California, for example, that allowed for legal microdosing, we would create the ability to access people who have this information that could coach you, that can ensure that you understand how to microdose, what mushrooms to microdose, and then ensure that there are no contraindications. But then a microdosing protocol, a lot of people are doing it like supplements. They're doing it on certain days. They're taking certain days off. They're doing it for 90 days consecutively. They're taking a break. There's the famous Stamets stack, which is niacin. Paul Stamets. He's
yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, Mr. Mushroom, yeah.
Yeah, so he's got his own stack, which is a microdose of psilocybin paired with lion's mane and niacin. And you don't have to do the niacin.
So why niacin?
It's cardioprotective. It helps with circulation. It opens up the blood vessels. If you take niacin, you feel kind of like tingly. Some people get flushed. So it shows that there's vasodilation. So in my opinion, it has to do with like the absorption and like the metabolism of the lion's mane. And
so when you're talking about lion's mane and some of these other cordyceps, these are functional mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big resurgence right now. I see it marketed all over the place in gummies and pills and all these different ways for functional mushrooms. So these are 100% legal. Mm-hmm. You can buy them over the counter today, and in different forms and various ways. So
it's an exploding market. It's
tell
crazy.
me about what are some of the things that people listening today should go out and try for functional mushrooms to get acquainted with mushrooms before they might decide to go the psilocybin route? Because I will tell you, lion's mane, I can feel it in my brain.
Yes, it's true. You can. I don't feel it anymore because I take 3 grams a day.
Oh, I was taking 2.
Yeah. I mean, I take 3 grams a day, and I take it for, focus, cognitive clarity. It can help improve your memory. That's what the research says.
Yes.
Take your lion's mane, people. I told my parents.
Remember to take the lion's mane.
Remember to take the lion's mane.
Yeah.
And if you can't remember, take lion's mane.
Yeah.
I told my parents to get on lion's mane like a while ago, and they've been taking it.
And how's that working for them?
I mean, they take it. It's a supplement, right? That you kind of take, and it kind of, supports your longevity. It's not necessarily like some people do have a felt effect in the moment. Other people are like, I'm taking it for the future. So my brain remains healthy. So I take it for those 2 reasons.
Of all the functional mushrooms, what are the best for cognition? Like which ones work the best for the brain?
You want ones that are, what was I going to say? What's the word that I want to use?
There's turkey tail, there's cordyceps, reishi, there's
antioxidants, because you want to protect from oxidative stress. You want to protect your cells. So reishi, turkey tail, chaga, lion's mane. There's even blends there's a blend called the Sacred 7 that has like a blend of 7.
I've never heard of that, Sacred 7.
But I can't remember the brand that makes it, but it's called, if you look up Sacred 7 mushroom blend, you'll find it, and you'll find other companies that make it as well. The thing about the blends is that there's a little bit of each one, and I don't quite like doing that. I like to take them one at a time, even if I'm taking them together, but I like having my bottle of lion's mane, my reishi, my chaga, my turkey tail. I don't like taking like a scoop of powder that blends all of them. That's just me.
Okay, so you're playing mad scientist. You're a formulator now. So you'll
and
start
I like
with
tinctures.
No,
for better absorption.
Okay.
Bioavailability.
So then you're looking at these different mushrooms. Where's a good starting point for a person? Lion's mane, probably?
Yeah, I think lion's mane is a non-negotiable. Also because there's, I don't know if this is accurate, but I think so. I think there's the most amount of research on lion's mane. It is one of the medicinal mushrooms, functional mushrooms, that has been the most researched. And I, as a scientist, I could stand behind lion's mane and say, yes, it works. Take it. It's great for your brain health. It's great prevention. Will it cure your Alzheimer's? No. If you have Alzheimer's, don't think that it's going to fix everything. But there have been studies about how lion's mane could be protective in the mechanism of Alzheimer's. They're looking at, how it could work. Like, what is it doing for a brain? Like these proteins, is it prevention? Is it curative? They're trying to understand, because apparently there might be a relationship. But I've had someone ask me, can I give lion's mane to my mom? She has early onset dementia. I'm like, no, that's not going to stop it. But if we're trying to talk about brain health, they'll say do Sudokus. Okay, do Sudokus and take your lion's mane.
What's
those like little math squares.
And you'll do them better. Like crossword exercises. Take some lion's mane and do some crossword puzzles, play some chess, something.
Yeah, exercise your mind, keep it flexible. I think lion's mane. There's turkey tail is really good for immunity. There's a lot of research with turkey tail and cancer.
Really?
Yeah, I think in China, turkey tail is part of a regimen in oncology.
Really?
Yeah. There are also some folks doing research around epilepsy and these functional mushrooms.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. There's a nonprofit called Lily's Lighthouse.
Okay.
The founder is a good friend of mine. Her daughter is epileptic, and it got to a point where she thought she was going to lose her daughter because she was having so many seizures. And she read, if I'm not mistaken, about reishi and how it could be protective and anti-epileptic. So she tried and just gave her daughter some of these functional mushrooms, and there was a marked reduction in the amount of seizures. And her daughter has done so much better. So she's trying to do research and educate, and she's put together this nonprofit called Lily's Lighthouse. The protocol is on the website. There are tons of parents that have tried this. I mean, just because they're functional and not psychedelic doesn't mean that they aren't powerful, right? Mm-hmm. So there needs to be research to truly understand how is this possible. So I think they're going to start with some preclinical animal studies, but they've already started to publish case reports about children that have done so much better after trying some of these medicinal mushrooms. So we're just scratching the surface. There's so much that...
And we're not talking about psilocybin. We're talking about you can go to GNC and get these mushrooms and whatever it is.
Yeah, they're essentially supplements. They're functional mushrooms. They have a function and adaptogenic effect on our body. They're medicinal in a different way. But yeah, to your question, I think lion's mane is a good one. Cordyceps. Yeah. If you're an athlete, you better be taking some cordyceps.
Okay.
I like blending cordyceps.
That was the Chinese athlete's secret is cordyceps, right?
Oh, yeah. There's some cordyceps that grow in the Himalayas.
Really?
Yeah. Far up there, that are called Tibetan gold because they're so valuable and so expensive. You've got two kinds of cordyceps. You have the sinensis and you have the militaris. And the militaris are the ones that we've managed to grow like in a farm, right, on substrates. And then the sinensis that are the ones that grow on insects.
Right, and those are the ones that are rare.
Those are just harder to cultivate.
Those are hard to catch, those little boogers.
Have you seen them?
Never.
It's crazy.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
They grow on another living thing.
Really?
And so there's this.
They're parasitic.
Yes. Well, have you seen The Last of Us? That HBO series?
No.
I mean, The Last of Us is a fantastic show, but I'm just like, you're giving a really bad rap to cordyceps because it's essentially a zombie show about the end of the world. And the cordyceps mushroom has now become a parasite on the human.
Oh, wow.
And is using the human to grow and take over. And I'm like, okay, cool. But I feel like you're sending people the wrong message about mushrooms.
Yes. So some of the laws of psilocybin. In Canada, there's a different set of laws than down here. And if I'm correct, there's more research being done in Canada with psilocybin, psychedelics, than being done here.
I don't think so.
Or are we just more quiet about it down here?
Okay, what Canada has that the U.S. doesn't have is the special access program.
Okay. So
this means that if a patient is in a very severe situation, end of life, with cancer, existential distress, and even more recently, cluster headaches, which is known as a suicide.
I was going to bring up.
We'll talk about
cluster headaches and LSD.
Yeah, and DMT.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Okay, go ahead.
So if you're in these, very severe situations, through the SAP program, you can appeal to Health Canada, which is the equivalent of the FDA in Canada,
Okay.
and make a case for why you should be able to access psilocybin and now MDMA outside of a clinical trial. So here, if you want to access certain psychedelics that are not decriminalized or legal, you have to go through a clinical trial. In Canada, we have this SAP program, and there's a nonprofit in Canada called Therasil, and they're partnered to train people to become prescribers, not like a doctor that writes a script for psilocybin and hands it to you, but a healthcare provider that can make a case for the patient in front of Health Canada and say, my patient needs to access this therapy because they're at the end of the rope. They've tried this, they've tried that, nothing is working, and I'm going to lose this human being if they don't try this. And it sounds great, and it is great, but it's really hard to get patients through. It takes a lot of work, and you'd think that so many patients are getting access, but they're not. It's really hard. It's hard to make the case. It's hard to win the case. But it was a huge moment last year when that one cluster headache patient was able to obtain psilocybin for the cluster headaches. So I did the training, and I've only been able to work on one patient so far.
I have a friend who has cluster headaches, and I said to him, have you tried LSD? And he looked at me like I'm from Mars. I said, no, I'm being serious with you. I'll send you some articles. And I also read that psilocybin also helps the cluster headaches as well as LSD. What is your experience with cluster headaches?
Yeah, I'm doing a research project right now. We're about to launch it like next week. It's a research survey around chronic headaches, and cluster headaches are included. But essentially, if you have 3 or more headaches per month times 3 months, 3 or more headaches, per month times 3 months, and they can be of the cluster kind. Did I just mess that up? I think I did. 15 or more headaches. That's what it is. It's 15 or more headaches per month times 3 months. You qualify as a person who has chronic headaches, and cluster headaches can be part of that diagnosis. And a cluster headache is different than a migraine and some of these others because they're cyclical, and you cannot interrupt the onset. Once it's coming on, there's no way to break it medically, and it could last for hours, it could last for days, and the pain is so severe that people have taken in their lives, and it is completely debilitating. And the other thing that's really interesting is the cycle. It will repeat itself, and whether that cycle is every 90 days for you or every 4 months, it's like clockwork. And that's a new kind of torture.
Okay, so let's talk about does LSD break that continuum and break that clockwork?
Anecdotally, it seems like some of these drugs can. Now they're trying to do more research. There's an organization called Cluster Busters.
Really?
Yeah.
Cluster Busters.
Yeah, and they're trying to fund research to truly understand why certain substances like psilocybin, like DMT, can interrupt the onset of a cluster headache.
Oh, it can interrupt it. It can stop it cold in its tracks.
Yes. So there's a gentleman that helped found this organization, and I can't recall his name right now, but I heard him speak recently, and he talked about how smoking DMT, just a little bit, the DMT pen, allowed to break the onset of the cluster headache.
I wonder if I could get this guy to do that.
So all of this is very anecdotal.
Do you find that older folks are more resistant to this kind of medication than younger ones, or?
No, I don't think so.
And I heard also people at the end of their life who do psilocybin, they are very, they're okay with death. They're not scared of it anymore.
Yeah. But isn't that also part of that ego death where you just accept death and you see death in a different way? Yeah. And it's helped people cross over and make that transition.
Yeah.
In Canada, in that special access program, they are treating these palliative care patients that are at end of life with psilocybin so that they can find acceptance around the fact that they have a terminal illness, that they're going to leave their families behind, and that death is not the end of the line. It's a transition into a new space, a new chapter. And this goes back to what we were talking about consciousness and energy. And it's this realization that like the energy that occupies this body, this vessel, is infinite. And if it's not in this body anymore, well, it's going to be somewhere else. And where, we don't know, but it's not going to disappear. It's not the end. So people deserve to die without this anxiety. And when you're a person that's been suffering from cancer or another terminal illness, there's a lot of distress.
I bet.
And reaching that conclusion, that acceptance, is not just amazing for that person, but for their families. So I think in palliation, it's an incredible tool.
What do you think the biggest achievement mankind is going to find using psychedelics?
The biggest achievement.
The biggest, how about aha moment?
Honestly, I don't know, but I think we're going to find stuff like...
Oneness?
But is that a scientific discovery? Oneness?
If it's in psychedelics, and we find that people can get treated and it stops them from some barbaric acts that other humans do to each other and makes the world a more peaceful place to exist. Again, 144 conflicts going on in the world today. We are
like you mean like a breakthrough.
Of people. Yeah.
Like a breakthrough.
A breakthrough of humanity where we all realize we're connected, and what the hell are we pulling out guns and shooting each other for?
I mean, that'd be a huge feat. I think if we
Do you
could
think it has a possibility of doing that?
It can, but like psychedelics also have a shadow side, and we've talked about the light side a lot, right? We've gone with all the positive.
The shadow side. Let's talk about the shadow side. Yeah. That's interesting.
Because I've had this conversation with people that have said, well, if we just give, psychedelics to like our corrupt politicians and world leaders, like the world would be a better place.
Perhaps.
Right. But psychedelics have a shadow side. They're not all fine and dandy and beautiful. There's a shadow side, and it can also feed the ego. It can dissolve the ego, but it can feed the ego.
How so?
I mean, if a perfect example are people who take psychedelics and think that they are enlightened and they are God's gift to the world, and now they become shaman and they lead people astray. This is common. People who think that now they can be facilitators and guides, and they abuse their power, and they use this sense of enlightenment or knowledge to manipulate people.
Build cults,
but also just like the therapeutic relationship between like a provider and a patient can go awry if a person is not using this medicine the way it's intended to, and if it's feeding their ego, and if they have sociopathic tendencies and narcissistic behavior patterns.
Well, hang on. If a person has a narcissistic, some kind of personality disorder, do you think that ego death could help them become self-aware?
It could, but it could also go the other direction.
How does that happen?
If a person is misguided, if they're not using it in the right way, if it's not being integrated in the right way. I mean, I have encountered people myself in the space that are like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Welcome to LA.
But welcome to the world. I mean, these people are everywhere. And when you're talking about psychedelics, these ways to essentially achieve these states, these higher states in very fast ways, when you're talking about vulnerable populations, there are people who are going to prey on the weak, and they're going to use psychedelics like that tool of manipulation. And I think that...
So as you're saying, people can use psychedelics to manipulate a tribe of people, or it just feeds their ego and they become a worse version of themselves?
They can. Or if someone is trying to lead a group, and you have a group that is searching for answers, you have a group that is suffering, a group that is vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I mean, we see it with religion, right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so psychedelics can be kind of used in the same kind of way. Like you can use this beautiful language of oneness and unity, and we are all one and we are all enlightened, to capture a group of people and lead them astray. If you can do it with religious belief, why couldn't you do it with psychedelics? A psychedelic experience is extremely spiritual. It is a religious experience. You're just not talking about
So you think
Catholicism and Judaism and...
You could get a group of people together and they could have a psychedelic experience with the wrong leader that could take them down a path of hell.
Of course, and they can attach and have unhealthy attachment issues, and once they're latched on, you can easily manipulate a person. These are just examples, but these are things that happen.
The dark side of
psychedelics.
Psychedelics.
Absolutely.
What else? What else is there? What? Have you ever met a person go, you know what? You're just not the right kind of person to take a psychedelic.
100%. 100%. Also, not all medicines are for everyone. We talk about all these different psychedelics and plants that can do all these amazing things, but like you might have an amazing time with MDMA and then you go and you try another one, call it ketamine, call it ayahuasca, and you don't have a wonderful, profound experience. You can have a dark experience. You can go into a state of temporary psychosis. You can see entities of darkness. You can just have I'm going to say a very shadow-driven experience that doesn't help you. It hinders you. And so it's important to realize that not all medicines are for everyone. And you need to be able to realize when a medicine isn't for you. And when you're going into a medicine experience, or if you're going to be engaging with a psychedelic substance, you have to realize that there is a light and shadow side to all of it. You have to be aware of that because you need to protect yourself, right? You need to pick your facilitators accordingly, your guides. I don't know about you, but like there have been moments where people have offered me an ayahuasca journey or another plant medicine journey, and energetically, based on very little, I've politely declined. And it could be because of that person. It could be because of the location, or it could just be some sort of intuitive guide that is telling me, maybe not.
So when I was doing my ayahuasca, the psychologist, I said, well, I want to deal with my traumas. She said, well, you just don't want to open the door that wide.
Well, you're opening Pandora's box.
Right.
Are you ready to open Pandora's box?
And that's what she said. You don't know what the hell's going to happen. So why don't we narrow the scope of that and just say, ask ayahuasca to be kind and to be gentle with the traumas that are revealed. Don't have to reveal all of them, but enough to get out of the session.
Right, step by step.
Yep, that worked.
But you might be opening.
But she knew about the dark side.
Absolutely, because there is a dark side, and even when you're
is
engaging
that like what they call
in
a bad trip?
Well, no, I don't think that's the same as a bad trip. I think it's a spectrum, right? You can have a bad trip. You can have anxiety while you're taking mushrooms and kind of
you can
not get out of an anxious loop, and you can say, I had a bad trip. Okay. But you could also have a complete meltdown and psychotic break and say, I had a bad trip.
Wow.
So it's a spectrum. So there's like a bad trip in the sense that the bad trip was dangerous to your mental health and to your health and endangered you. But there's also the bad trip that is like, I had an unpleasant experience. I wanted to have a pleasant experience. I wanted to laugh and see beautiful things, but instead I cried and I felt anxious about the future. That is also technically, quote unquote, a bad trip. But then you need to be able to take that bad trip and find the meaning of it, find the sense of it, and ask yourself, okay, why did that happen? Let me turn this bad trip into something beneficial for me. So when we say bad trip, I feel like the word is kind of tossed around, because a real bad trip in my book means something harmful happened. But if you didn't have the experience that you thought you would have, it's about reframing that experience and integrating that experience. And the integration isn't just like a 24-hour, like, let me journal and talk to my coach. It's days of sitting with your thoughts and writing about your thoughts and trying to make meaning of your experience, and then trying to effect change moving forward. So you're not repeating the same BS that you've repeated over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's a shift in our reality. It's a shift within ourselves. And psychedelics, it's not just a medicine. It's not just a pharmacological agent. It's a total life change. If you're not adapting to that experience, then you're not integrating. And I'm not saying you have to turn your life upside down, sell all of your possessions and move to India. It could be really tiny, small things, you know, like just being kind to your neighbor or prioritizing someone that you might not have prioritized before.
Like yourself.
Like yourself, right? Yeah. Being kind to your own self, just little things. Sure. And if you're stuck in a loop of doing things that aren't helping you, then let's start trying to unwind that loop and start helping ourselves.
Back to the dark side of psychedelics. So what does that exactly mean? It just amplifies the bad characteristics that a person has?
It can, but it could also put someone on a power trip and essentially, depending on what position they have, like I gave the example earlier, if like they're a facilitator or a coach and they have clients, you know, or people that are relying on them, it's a way that they could manipulate a situation, and it could lead to a power trip. There are people who want to be idolized and followed, and there could be a lot of abuse there on an emotional level, on a sexual level, physical level. So those things have happened. And there's so many different kinds of examples of how psychedelics can be used to manipulate in the wrong direction, because you're so open. Again, you're in this like very neuroplastic state. And going back to that neuroplastic state, you can do a lot within that window of neuroplasticity that can serve you. But if you have negative experiences, harmful experiences, feedback that is harmful, then your brain will absorb that. And that can change your way of thinking for the worse. And you will go in the other direction. So I always think that being in a psychedelic state and being in the post-psychedelic state is a vulnerable position to be in. It's a vulnerable state. And you are very receptive and are going to be absorbent to all kinds of experiences. So you want to make sure that the experience with the psychedelic and the experience after the psychedelic, it's not just about positivity. It's safe, and you have the right people around you. When we talk about set and setting and choosing your guides, you want to find the right people for you that aren't going to lead you astray, that aren't going to harm you, so that you don't have negative or dangerous, harmful feedback entering your space. It's a precious space.
So how do you create your special space?
Preparation.
For the special moment. Preparation, of course. What does that look like?
So it's defining, you know, what your current state is. It's defining what you are trying to achieve, and it's calling in what feels most supportive to you. So if that means getting really granular about the type of person you want to engage in, and like to the point where if you have someone who suffered a trauma at the hands of like the opposite sex, maybe your coach isn't going to be of the opposite sex because that's going to be a trigger. You really got to think about these things. You know, if you don't want any kind of physical touch because that could be a trigger, then you want to make sure that that's communicated with your facilitator. So there's a lot of intention and preparation that goes beyond lighting some candles and setting some really cool vibey lights and picking the music. You got to think about your past. You got to think about your present. You got to think about what you want to achieve. And yeah, you got to get really granular about how you're going to get to that better place, what your integration is going to look like. You got to write it down. And I think that if it's your first experience, you got to work with someone, because they're going to have experience and they're going to think of things that you're never going to think about.
Correct.
You know, and I'm all for having solo journeys. It's beautiful, but I didn't start that way. You know, I read books, I spoke to people who had experience, I sat with people who had experience, and then eventually I got to a place where I was like, okay, maybe I can do some mushrooms by myself.
When was that? How long ago was you decided, you know what, I've read enough, I'm ready to try it?
Like my first experience?
Yeah.
Oh, my very first experience with a psychedelic, I wasn't informed like I am now. Like my very first MDMA experience was like the typical, you know, I'm 25 or whatever, 24, I don't know how old I was, and I'm going to see a DJ. So I didn't know what was possible. But later down the line, I started to hear, I started to read, I started to learn, people were talking about psilocybin. The fact that like the collective and like the masses were experiencing psychedelics in a more open, environment meant that there were more educational tools and information. And then that led to my first real psilocybin experience. And I was here in LA and I was 28 or 27. And it's kind of late. A lot of people, well, it's not late. It's just, it's right on time. Timing is divine. It happened when it was supposed to happen.
That's right.
And I was informed, but it inspired me to become more informed after that. And I never ever think or adopt the mentality that my learning is done and that I'm no longer a student. My philosophy is that we're all eternally students. There's always more to learn. It's just that my understanding and my confidence level has just increased. And depending on the medicine, I will say, I need a coach, I need a guide, I need a facilitator. Sometimes I don't, but I always cultivate the right safe space that is supportive to me. But I'm never going to say like, I know enough, like, let's go. It's just that I feel empowered to venture into these spaces. And I know it's going to keep me safe and I know how to be responsible. So it's like a foundation. It's a strong foundation. But I think we could always benefit from a guide at some point.
So a person wants to take a psychedelic experience, have a psychedelic experience, healing. What type of a journey should they go on with? What type of psychedelic?
I mean, I can't answer that question.
Oh, come on.
No, it's different for everyone. Of course. I mean,
but that's the thing is the difference. You don't know. So what's a safe one to start with? Like, there's got to be one that's safe.
Psilocybin tends to be like the safer one, like medically speaking. It is non-addictive. It is not neurotoxic. When I did my pharmacology of psilocybin course, I had this aha moment that was like, oh, we evolved with this plant. We humans have been consuming psilocybin for a very long time. It doesn't really interfere with much of our biology and our metabolism. And
what about the nauseating?
I mean, that's the nauseating is not toxicity
and all that.
The nauseating is not toxicity. The nauseating is because the majority of your serotonin receptors are in your gut.
Yes.
That's why you feel nauseous.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Also, if you're taking it in like chocolate, it could be nauseating as well. Like I don't like taking it in chocolate.
I see a lot of it in chocolate.
Yeah, I personally don't like that, but other people love it. You know? So, I mean, I know that there are certain psychedelics that have lower risk profiles. And if that's what you're asking, then psilocybin has the lowest.
What I'm asking. Yes,
right. Yeah. Then it has the lowest risk profile.
And there's different psilocybin mushrooms. Like there's one called Enigma. It's the second most powerful psilocybin.
Yeah, I start with some golden teacher.
Some golden teacher.
Start with some golden teacher. It's a golden teacher.
Yeah. Any of the albino strains have you tried? Albino Louisiana, Avery, any of those?
Yeah, and I've tried Ghost as well. Have you heard of Ghost?
No, I've never had Ghost. Tell me, explain that.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain, but for me, it feels like a more visionary experience. Golden Teacher, it's like it's in the name. It just feels like a nice little warm guide. It's a ray of sunshine. It's a beautiful, gentle strain to start with. Penis envy is one that people find very strong. I don't like it. I don't like it. Every time I do it, I don't have a good experience. You know, you're talking about a bad trip. I sometimes ask myself, is it trying to tell me something, or does my body and biochemistry just not like it? And then if someone is looking to start, okay, if you want to start on your own, start with a microdose, find your threshold, see what dose starts to affect, shifts in your perception and your visual field. What do you feel? Do you feel it in your body? Do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it in your head? And then slowly, work your way up. People lemon tech at home. There's so many instructions online on how to lemon tech. It's fantastic. You can just go on YouTube. You can find a page on the internet
and
look
for lemon tech.
Just look for lemon tech, and you're going to find it. I do think that there's a lot of power in sitting in a,
the reason people do lemon tech is so they don't get the nauseated feeling.
Right, because it breaks down also. it breaks down some of the components of the mushroom that are hard to digest.
Yes.
So if I, going back to what I said, yes, the serotonin in your gut is going to contribute to that kind of like butterflies in your tummy sensation, because people report it with other serotonergic psychedelics like MDMA, and there's no mushroom to break down with MDMA, but people will feel like butterflies in their tummy or like nerves, and that is the serotonin's effect. When you eat the whole mushroom, it is hard to digest, and it can lead to digestive upset. So the lemon tech certainly helps with that. Another thing that helps with like the whole like digestion piece and even like the onset is something like a tincture, because when you take it orally.
You mentioned tinctures before, and you mentioned that. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's talk about tinctures.
Yeah, so they get absorbed by the mucous membranes in your mouth, and so it's a more direct path to your bloodstream. So the onset will be quicker. It's more bioavailable. When you eat something, it's got to go through first and second pass metabolism. By the time it gets absorbed in your bloodstream, it could be an hour later, and there's not much left of it. So that's what we call the bioavailability. The thing about the tinctures is that you have some that are stabilized in alcohol, you have some that are stabilized in glycerin. If you're taking a lot of tinctures that are stabilized in alcohol on a daily basis, like functional mushrooms, yeah, you're going to get some heartburn.
Really?
I had to learn that the hard way.
Can you use like medium chain triglycerides to deliver that?
You can.
You can?
Yeah, you can. And there's like the glycerin too as a delivery system. There's just different ways. I had to figure out that chocolate wasn't the way for me. It just more digestive upset. Yep. Some people are stabilizing psilocin in gummies. So psilocybin gets metabolized into psilocin, and psilocin is the active. That's what makes you feel high. That's what gives you the...
You ever heard of Pitocin?
Pitocin? No, I haven't.
There is a new form of psychedelic that is not psilocin, but it's Pitocin. They've stabilized it.
Okay. And where is it coming from?
Some really smart dudes.
No, but like where?
A team of scientists.
What is it?
I have no idea where the lab is.
All right.
I'm not privy to all that stuff.
But psilocin or psilocin is from psilocybin. Pitocin is from what? We don't know.
It's an analog of psilocin.
Okay. Interesting. I'm going to look into that. I've never heard of it before. But yeah, people are stabilizing it in gummies.
It's brand new. It's just out there. I was
cool.
Exposed to it. So,
and?
By the way.
What do you think?
I haven't tried it yet. I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah.
You'll have to tell me what that's like.
Yeah. Yeah.
The cool thing about having the active stabilized is that you can mitigate a lot of like side effects. You can get a more like direct experience. You don't have to wait till it's all metabolized. And so some people are making like really nice pectin, no sugar alcohols, fruit pectin, real fruit gummies that essentially the minute it's like hitting your esophagus, it's starting to enter your bloodstream, and it's a cleaner, more enjoyable feeling. Instead of feeling it so much in your belly, you're kind of feeling it in your chest and your head. It's really fascinating.
So we've covered a lot of ground.
Oh yeah, we jumped around.
I've got a very curious mind. What haven't we covered that we should have covered?
Good question. Talked about women's health, we talked about neurology, we talked about plants.
Men's health, I'll talk about that. That I think men should do it. They should go on a psilocybin or an ayahuasca journey, and if they've had some heavy trauma, go down to Tijuana and do that ibogaine. They do it in a hospital.
Yeah.
It's a 24-hour deal.
Yeah. I think society has crafted a culture where it's not cool for men to be tapped into their feelings, into their emotions.
I say BS to that.
It is BS.
Yeah.
And if psychedelics can help men kind of bypass
Help me a lot.
This stupid philosophy that has been instilled into our culture, then I'm with it.
Interesting.
I think also in like couples therapy, it's fantastic.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we talked about...
Do you think more MDMA or psilocybin for couples?
I think MDMA is like the leading most popular one, because there is this feeling of bonding that happens. And there's also all the fear-based thinking, the things that you're afraid to share, the fact that you are ashamed to be vulnerable.
That your shadow.
All of that just melts away.
Yeah.
And it allows for these open lines of communication that are so hard to foster sometimes between people, especially couples that have been through hell and back and that have been hardened. And it has just saved marriages and relationships.
You've seen like relationships that are ready to go to hell in a handbasket.
Absolutely.
And just turned it around.
Absolutely.
How many treatments? How many times? How long did it take?
A few times.
A few times.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and it should. It's work.
Yeah.
I don't think anything should just be like this magic solution.
By the way, I'm glad you said it's work.
It is work.
Because it is work. I mean, when I did my thing, I went in with intent.
Yeah.
And did it. Got a big debriefing. And then immediately, okay, go upstairs and journal.
Good.
I journal all this stuff. And
it is work.
Those words to this day.
We call it like the work. Like it is the work. It's if you are expecting it to be this like super easy spiritual bypass.
No way.
No, and then you're going into it all wrong, and you shouldn't be there in the first place. You got to like get to the point where you accept that you're going to be doing hard work, and this is a tool that's going to help you navigate that work. And yes, I've seen couples, and couples have told me how much it's helped them. And I think that any kind of psychedelic that you practice with your partner can be extremely eye-opening and bonding, and it could allow you to reach depths that you might not be able to reach. It's an exploration of each other's consciousness. I think you end up having conversations that are so deep about your childhood, about the future. Just the fact that you're able to share and explore on this other level is incredibly bonding. And it goes back to the fact that just having a ritual, whether it's with a medicine or date night or going on a hike and getting outdoors and doing something together, is one of the things that helps people stay together, is having something that you share. It's not enough to share your house and your bank account. You have to have something that you connect with on a deep level together and that you enjoy, which is also going back to talking about joy, which I said before. When people say like the therapy and the recreation, it's like two different areas.
It is.
It is, but it's not.
Okay.
Because experiencing joy is extremely therapeutic. It's healing. When you go out, just go out with your friends to dance and listen to music and have a great time and you laugh.
Take some mushrooms, go to an EDM concert, and find out a different reality.
I mean, you don't have to. You can just go do it without the mushrooms.
Well, I can turn on the TV and listen to whatever, right?
But don't you, how does it feel when you go out with your friends or you go do something that brings you
joy?
100% joy. It's a total reset. It's a refresh. You go back to work, you're a little more patient, you're a little bit more motivated. You're a better person.
So psilocybin is a reset for the brain?
Psilocybin is a reset for the brain. It is a reset for the brain. But I'm just talking about joy without substance. So if we go back to then weaving in a substance, whether it's by yourself or with your partner, you're now kind of playing in these realms of like fostering joy and connection with yourself, which is the foundation. And once this is really good, then this can be really good, right? So I always think about what psychedelic therapies and what this kind of, third wave and this all of this resurgence around psychedelics, what is it actually doing? And I think it's telling people to reprioritize themselves and their wellness. It's telling them to remember that joy is something that we're born with an inherent right to. It's showing us that we need to have empowerment and agency and ask for more healthcare solutions. And it's also showing us that our healthcare system is even more broken than we realized.
I agree there.
And again, it's not just about this molecule, this medicine. It's about kind of reshaping our culture, our society, our humanity.
Well, just like with cannabis, you have an entourage effect. You have the same thing with mushroom. There's so many different chemicals in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking at the whole mushroom. It's not just like taking, the isolating the psilocin.
No.
When they say the magic mushroom, like I do truly believe that this plant has more to offer than its active compound.
There's a great documentary called The Spirit Molecule that people should watch.
Yeah, it is a good documentary. It is a good documentary. Yeah.
Well, Well, if someone wants to get hold of you, Stephanie, how do they get hold of you? This has been a very, very interesting interview.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's so much to talk about, and it's been really great. I have a website, and it's beyondconsulting.life.
Beyondconsulting.life.
And there's a contact form there. And so you can write to me. Beyond Consulting supports the plant medicine and psychedelic space.
Okay.
So companies from nonprofits to biotechs to clinics to plant medicine companies. We go in with research and science solutions, clinical operations. We're equipped to support on many levels. And you can get in touch with me there, whether it's something that has to do with your business or just a question, or you just want to say hi. There's also a newsletter that goes out with blog articles. I write about all kinds of topics that have to do with not just psychedelics, you know, just life as well. And that gets sent out if you're on the newsletter list. So subscribe, and yeah, don't hesitate to say hello.
What was the URL again?
Beyondconsulting.life.
Beyondconsulting.life.
Yeah.
And is that located here or in Canada?
We're here.
It's both places? You're here.
We're here. It's you know, I'm remote and my clients are a little all over the place.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
I got off
with
the phone
Zoom,
with,
you can go anywhere in the world now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the great gifts post-pandemic is that it opened up this ability to kind of communicate with the world in different ways.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's been great to have you here today.
Thanks.